Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. We are now 2 days away from the start of the Overwatch League season, so I wanted to give some preseason predictions. I've been seeing a ton of people give some of these predictions, and so I wanted to give you some of my own. I got some categories that are ones for myself, but a lot of it is just going to be some of the awards that I will likely give out at the end of the season. Not all of them, some of them will be different, but these are my pre-season predictions. I believe I have 8 of them for you, so we're going to jump in. Take a look at these. I will announce them as I go. Let's start with one of the more interesting ones that I think would just kind of be some of these player-based ones that are somewhat interesting that I have on here. The first award I have here is called the Impact Player on a New Team, or the prediction of the player who I think will be the most impactful player who played in the Overwatch League last season and is now on a new team for this season. The player who I think will basically be the biggest name on their team, will have the most impact. And for me, this one's pretty simple. This is not really this crazy out there guess. I have for this one Fury. I really like Fury. I think Fury is one of the best off tanks in the league. I think he is top 3. There's conversations about a lot of different off tanks for who is in that list, but to me, Fury is top 3. And you put him on a team with some really talented players. Decay and Mag and Assassin. Some really strong names on that team. I think this is a really solid place for Fury. I think he's going to be a really strong player, and so I definitely think he is going to be one of the players that has the biggest impact on a new team, because I think that he's really talented, and I think anywhere you put him, he's going to find some success. So I have Fury here on that impact player on a new team. Moving on to my comeback player of the year. There's not that many players that I think will have a shot at this award. Typically, you kind of think of this one has to be someone who either A, was not very good in 2020, but will have a bounce back year in 2021, or somebody who was kind of out of the league for a year, comes back in and has a really big year. So there's definitely some names that are in contention for this one. You have the likes of OG, who did not have a great year last year, or Yakpung, who was very weak in 2019, before having a pretty strong season, potentially, in 2021, right? Didn't play in the Overwatch League in 2020, so what can he do going forward here, going into 2021? But I did not give it to either of those two. Yakpung I have some concerns about still, as much as I think New York is going to be a better team than I think a lot of people had originally anticipated them to be. I think that because of how new a lot of those pieces are, Yakpung's going to get overshadowed anyway. And then with OG, I have more concerns. And I don't know how good, once again, like, he's going to be able to be when there's a lot of really good players around him, though I do think he has a pretty good chance. The player I'm going to go with, actually, is I'm37. Of course, now for the Boston Uprising, but he played for the Toronto Defiant for the 2019 season. That's the last 3 stages of the season. Of course, the commissioner, the big moment he had with Danny on that broadcast. I really like I'm37. I think that he actually looked pretty good in the things that we've seen him in the experimental card tournament. You can't really make a lot out of that because it was very non-meta, and also I thought he looked pretty good in the Steel Series Invitational. He'll have to have an increased role now that Soon is off the team, so definitely more of a burden on his back. I think they'll probably sign somebody to help him out, but I do like I'm37 a lot. I think he is someone who will have a pretty good bounce back year. You know, I think one of the big problems for him was getting to the Overwatch League too soon. He didn't have that time to really develop. He had that really quick speed run, but now he has more of a chance to kind of develop into a talent that I think really is really strong, and who will end up being pretty good. Before I do the big 3 awards, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Coach of the Year, I want to do some other ones that I think are kind of interesting that I wanted to talk about. One of the awards that I have here, or predictions I have here, is which region do I think will be stronger between the two? I think this is an interesting question because I look at the 2 regions and I think it's a very interesting thing to look at, because on one hand, you have the North American region, which I think is very top-heavy. You have the likes of San Francisco, LA Gladiators, Washington Justice, Florida Mayhem. You know, then you start getting into the likes of like the Dallas Fuel and the Atlanta Reign, where they're good, but are they going to be meta dependent? Of course, with the Dallas Fuel now, they have no more XZ, so What are they going to do about that? And you start getting into a lot more question marks, I think, with a lot of the North American teams. And despite the fact that there are some of these teams up towards the top that are very, very good and really talented rosters, as you start to kind of trickle down, you get into some much weaker rosters, where I think that what you're going to see in North America is the likes of the Shock and the Justice and these top teams just kind of destroying and just kind of utterly annihilating some of these lower level teams. And there'll be much more disparity between the top and the bottom. APAC, on the other hand, smaller region, only 8 teams as opposed to the 12 in North America. And when I look at APAC, I don't really see a really clear hierarchy, other than I think Shanghai is the best and the LA Valiant are the worst. In between that is really a big mystery. There's a lot of question marks about a lot of those teams because they're all pretty talented. But there's question marks. Will Hangzhou be able to get their roster to work with the mixed Korean and Chinese roster? Will Chengdu make the same kind of things, the same kind of mistakes that have kind of held them back in the past, of really just kind of not letting the team build a culture that is very like meta proof? New York has all these rookies. How good are they going to be? Guangzhou, you feel pretty good about the coaching staff and that tank line, but the rest of the team, you're kind of like, how good are they going to be? You have the Philadelphia Fusion, who now have this new Korean roster. Are they going to be any good? Is that going to work for them? The Seoul Dynasty were super inconsistent last season, so there's all these questions in the APAC region. But I think that the APAC region is stronger because of that. You have this region in Asia where you have this one team that looks really, really good, this one team that looks like it probably won't be that good, and you have a bunch of rosters that are going to be very competitive with each other, which means that you're going to have overall better matches, and you're going to have, as a result, better teams because they're playing each other much closer, they're learning a lot more. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that the best team in the league by the end of the season is going to be from Asia, right? Shanghai might be the best team by the end of the season, they might be the Grand Finals champions, but you have teams like the Shock and the Gladiators and the Justice in North America who are going to play each other a couple times this season, and they'll learn from each other. They'll play each other several times. They'll adjust and adapt and become better teams over time from that. But they're also going to have some games that are pretty much guaranteed wins, in my opinion, which is what makes the APAC region stronger. I think it'll be closer, more competitive. I think it'll be more exciting. Very excited for the APAC region, so that is the region that I will say will be stronger. Let's take a look real quickly at my things that I feel that I probably got wrong in my power rankings. There's 2 that I want here. A team that I placed too high and a team that I placed too low. So for the team that I placed too high, I am going to go with the Guangzhou Charge. I had them at 9th overall. As I mentioned before when I was talking about Asia and the APAC region, I think the big thing with the Guangzhou Charge that they have in their benefit is they have a really good coach and coaching staff. 2 former players in Damon and Neko, plus Arachne, who was an assistant coach for Krusty. So you know that he's going to have some of those Krusty teachings with him. He's going to bring some of that to the Guangzhou Charge, and I think that is something that will benefit this Charge roster. But one of the things that I kind of alluded to when I put them ahead of New York in my power ranking video, I even like said it directly too, is they're in a very similar place to New York skill-wise, but the more I kind of think about this roster, I don't think they are. I think they have the better tank line for sure than New York. I think that's not even a question, but even last season, we saw Bianca and Mono obliterate this Guangzhou Charge team, which was arguably better at the time. You can make arguments whether or not they were better or not. Their coaching staff was not as good, but really, really strong team. And by the end of the season, New York was just kind of having their way with Guangzhou. I mean, there was the Chengdu meta in the lead up to the Countdown Cup where New York just ran the ball Zarya and just kind of obliterated them and exposed some of the weaknesses of Krong and Rio. And yes, they have Jihun to kind of make up for some of that lack in the ball that Rio has, but even still, you looked at kind of what happened there, and Krong was an MVP candidate, and he, when he wasn't playing Sigma, had some pretty noticeable weaknesses. And so I think Guangzhou probably won't be as good as I thought they were going to be, especially when you consider how competitive this region is going to be. Even if Hangzhou is not as good as they can be, I think they're not going to be as good as they can be. They're probably still going to take several matches off of Guangzhou just because the talent level is still really high on all the rosters there. And it's really going to come down to who has the best coaching And while I do think Guangzhou has some very talented coaching, right, I think there's other teams in the APAC region that have coaches that are just as strong and stronger rosters that I think will ultimately be the reason why Guangzhou meets some struggles. I don't think they're going to be bad, and I could see them being better than where I had them or exactly where I had them, but I get the feeling that by the end of the season they're probably not going to be as high as I had predicted them. But for a team that I think I may have placed too low, or I'm going to predict I placed too low, I'm going to put the Houston Outlaws. I was pretty low on the Houston Outlaws, but some things have started to kind of go their way recently. The Boston Uprising, of course, losing soon. That's a loss that I think in the long run won't hurt them too much, but in the short term, what will be a bit of an issue for them. That gives Houston, I think, a little bit more leeway. And Houston starts the season against the Dallas Fuel team, who just lost their best hit scan player. So Houston, who has Happy, who is a very, very talented hit scan player, might have the advantage now against Dallas, because Houston has their full roster. They have everybody that they could want. They can run the composition that they're the best at, and that is meta. Dallas is going to be limited, especially early on, so that kind of helps Houston. The reports and rumors are that the meta to start the season is going to be Rush, and you feel pretty good about Jonggu and Piggy with their history playing in Korean contenders. A lot of Rush there, and also just kind of an overall pretty solid look, I think. I still have some questions about this team, and I think that their support line is going to be ultimately the thing that holds them back. I think that while there is talent there, I don't think it's going to be necessarily enough, but I do think they have a strong tank line, and they have some really good DPS players. You know I am KSF's biggest fan. That is my boy. I want him to succeed wherever he goes. And you pair that with the likes of Happy and Dante and Hydration, you get a really strong DPS line that's very flexible for this Outlaws team. So I do actually think that they probably will finish better than where I had them. I don't know how much higher. I think they have a potential to get into that kind of top 10 range potentially, but I'm not quite ready to say that they're a top 10 team just yet. I think I probably put them a little lower than they really will be, but I'll need to wait and see. Moving on to the big three awards, let's start with Coach of the Year. You're going to notice a bit of a trend here in terms of where I have some of these players and some of the teams that I think will do pretty well. My Coach of the Year prediction may be a surprise to a lot of people, but I have Supreme, the head coach of the Washington Justice. I want people to understand something here about Supreme, because I think Supreme gets a pretty bad rap, and a lot of people just assume that because he was on the Justice and he only did well as a coach when they got the when they were able to have Decay on their team. I think a lot of people just say like, oh, he's not that good of a head coach, or he's not that good of a coach in general. I want to explain some things about Supreme that I think people don't necessarily realize. So, Supreme became the head coach for the Hangzhou Spark in the middle of June 17th. They had John Galt for the beginning of the season. John Galt leaves. Supreme becomes the head coach. Now, the team did not find a ton of success during the time that Supreme was the head coach. They had added Stitch and Janu at this point, so, you know, it became something where you were not really sure if having Stitch and Janu was the thing that kind of helped him. And then, of course, in August, he gets Decay. But if you look at the results for the Washington Justice in the time that they had Supreme as a head coach, it's actually not as bad as I think people would think it is. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. Supreme was formerly with the Hangzhou Spark when they were the 4th seeded team in 2019. He was an assistant coach. He was not a head coach. He was an assistant coach. But still very impressive that he was able to have such a successful time. And I would say that after that point in time, the team was never really as good. In 2020, the team was not as good as they were after Supreme had left. And so when you look at the results of the Justice after that point in time, his first game as a head coach, not great. A 3-0 loss to the San Francisco Shock. Okay, That's a little unfortunate. He was an interim head coach for a little bit as well, but he did not really get the success very early on. But where things start to change is his time develops. He gets a win the next week over Boston. Not a great Boston team, but still a Boston team. But then the following week was the Summer Showdown, where the Washington Justice got a win over the LA Gladiators. Yes, they didn't do much beyond that. They lost to the Shock after that. But the team started to look a lot better after that point. The Summer Showdown was kind of a bit of a turn. They struggled still. They were not a really good team. But when they got decay, things started to improve a lot for this team. And even still, they had a win over the Houston Outlaws in July before they added decay. They had a pretty close series with Paris before that, or a little after that as well. Supreme, I think, actually deserves some credit for his role getting this Justice team to have a pretty strong look. They were not very good on paper. They were missing a ton of players. They lacked in so many places where you would expect or hope that you would have some more talent on your team, and they didn't have it. They didn't really have a good main tank, and I think that that's something that a lot of people don't really focus on as much. But I think the Washington Justice proved themselves to actually be a pretty decent team when Supreme became the head coach. And of course, they had their really good playoff run. So I think Supreme has a ton of potential to be a really good head coach. I think he proved himself a lot during his time with the Spark. And then I think with the Justice, he's actually looked better than a lot of people give him credit for. And so for me, he is a really good shot at being the coach of the year, because I think he has actually been way better than people have realized, and he's gone under the radar a little bit. I've seen a lot of people question the coaching for this team, but I actually feel very confident with it. I think Supreme's a great coach. I think he's proven himself, and he is my prediction for the coach who is going to win Coach of the Year. I think it's a bit of a reach potentially, but I do really like what Supreme has put together so far. Next is my Rookie of the Year prediction. Let's just stick with the Washington Justice while we're at it. Part of why Supreme's going to really, I think, find success is because his roster is really talented. And I think Mag has a very good chance at being the Rookie of the Year this season. He's incredible. I think he is the best main tank coming into the season from contenders. He's arguably one of the best main tanks we've seen enter the Overwatch League. Just kind of coming into the league ever. Since the inaugural season, where you had the likes of Mono and Miro, who were really, really highly touted. And some of them were not as good as what people thought they were going to be, But I can't think of a time in 2019 or 2020 that a main tank joined the league and there was this much hype around how good he was as a talent. I think Mag is incredible. I think there is so much possibility for Mag to be arguably the best main tank in the league. You pair him with a really strong off-tank partner. You have some really good DPS players. I think his support line will be better than people give it credit for. I think you're looking at a very talented player here in Mag. I think he has a very good chance of winning Rookie of the Year, so he is my prediction. And for MVP, let's just stick with the theme of the Washington Justice. I'm just kidding. I know a lot of people are predicting Decay to win MVP. I think it's a really good chance that he actually does win MVP, but I'm actually going to predict Violet to be the MVP. I think Violet is arguably the best player in the Overwatch League right now. He is continually getting better season after season after season, and I genuinely think that this is a very, very, very good year and good opportunity for him to potentially get that MVP award. I give a lot of flack to Violet for some of his behavioral things that have gone outside of the games, but I do think Violet's an incredible talent. I think he's one of the best players in the league. I think for what it's worth right now, he's the best flex support in the league, and possibly even the best player in the league. Even before the IBM Power Rankings thing came out and put Violet at the top, I had Violet here as my potential MVP. I think he's really, really good. I think he has a really good shot at being the MVP. And so for me, he is the player who I would say right now has the best shot. But those are my preseason predictions. I'm sure that some of these will be very wrong, and I'm sure there's going to be some comments on some of the things that I have said in the past, but this is where I love to have discussions and hear from you guys on what you think. So that's all from me for today. If you want more videos like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this, because I put videos like this out. But the season's starting, I'm going to try to make more content like this regularly, so hopefully with the season getting started and my life hopefully getting a little less busy here in the next month or two, I will be able to get some more regular content out for you. So that's all from me. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye bye.